Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. Thank you for coming back to listen to more of Queen Andraya. This is Chapter 7. Here we go. Chapter 7. Fierce and Forgotten. Of all the boorish men in the kingdom, Chancellor Dolian has to be the worst. Andraya spat as she yanked her heels off and tossed them to the side. Caleen sat with meekness on the queen's overstuffed bed as she watched Andraya pace in front of her. The crusted man attempted to trick me into thinking he could be agreeable, when all the while he was only trying to fool me into letting my guard down, so he could make every decision for me. Can you believe he actually said that? She spun around to face her lady-in-waiting. Caleen stared back with raised eyebrows. You mean he basically wants me to hand over the head crown to him? Andraya interrupted, forgetting she had asked Caleen a question. There was no time for conversation. This was her chance to rant. It's as if he wants me to have an honorary title only, Andraya said, as she continued to pace. Just like that dinosaur of a man we have as our Grand Duke. She threw her hands up in frustration. Does he really think I have no knowledge at all? I was raised in Medine, for heaven's sakes. I have studied much more than music and art. Maybe you should show him your elite certificate of law, Caleen suggested. Andraya stopped short and faced Caleen. Yes, I should most definitely do that, she said, pointing a finger at her. I doubt even the scabby old men have achieved that. Caleen nodded with a smile. Benjamin? Andraya called. Caleen jumped in place at the sudden shout. Andraya walked briskly to the door and yanked it open. Benjamin! She shouted into the hallway. She heard a faint response from somewhere distant, followed by marked footsteps up the stairs. Caleen rushed to the queen's side with a pair of silver shoes, just in time for Andraya to slip them on before the first footman appeared. Here I am, your majesty, Benjamin said, a little out of breath. He wiped a trickle of perspiration off his carrot-colored hairline. Benjamin, are you aware of the framed certificate of law hanging in my corner of the library? Yes, my queen. I need you to remove it and promptly hang it up in the royal council room on the north side of the long silver table. Benjamin gave a firm nod. As you wish. And do make sure it is centered. Benjamin looked as if he were resisting an eye roll, but he said, Yes, your majesty. Thank you. That is all. Benjamin bowed, and Andraya shut the door. Oh, we must get going on my appearance, Andraya said. I must look fierce and beautiful again? Caleen asked. Andraya shook her head. No, it must be more than that. She glanced at the ceiling to find the right word. Intimidating. She pointed a finger at Caleen again. I must look intimidating. Caleen pursed her lips and cocked her head. Perhaps a gold dress that fans out at the waist. Andraya batted a hand at her as she began to pace once more. Oh no, that screams nothing but elegant dancing. What about the autumn-colored dress, the one you wore at the New Seasons Festival last year? The queen turned a sharp head. The one Gordon liked? She snorted in disgust. Never. Caleen scowled and slumped a little. How about a bold red? Andraya clapped her hands once. Yes! But the next dozen dresses Caleen suggested, Andraya hated the idea of. Oh, we are wasting time. Why don't you start on my hair? The queen walked across her large bedchamber and sat at the gold vanity. Andraya watched in awe through the mirror as Caleen twisted her hair up into elegant braids and twists with magic hands. Caleen painted a deep coat of bold red on the queen's lips. I have never seen anyone with lips quite as full as yours, Andraya, Caleen said. I do believe it's your most distinct feature. Andraya grinned at that, turning to see her white teeth in the mirror. That's very kind. It looks like my skin could use some color, however. Caleen added rouge to the queen's cheeks, and black lines curling out from her eyelids, as well as a brown pencil to her eyebrows. Andraya even allowed her to paste on some abnormally long black lashes over her own that curled out and up. Andraya hated the feel of them, but loved the look. Did anyone give you trouble over the letter you sent out? Caleen asked. What letter? Caleen paused from her task of placing various beauty tools inside a box. The one with your emergency seal. To my mother? Andraya gasped and clapped a hand over her mouth. Caleen blanched. You didn't forget, did you? Andraya's heart sank as low as it possibly could. She turned around to face her friend. Oh, Caleen, I am so sorry. So very, very sorry. Caleen shook her head in a daze. How could you? I don't know, Andraya stammered. I've been so stressed. I was up all night studying, and I received the most dreadful news last night, and more dreadful than my mother dying? Caleen cried. No, of course not. Andraya reached for Colleen's hand, but she pulled away and took a step back. I can't believe this. She was like a mother to you. She raised you. I know, and I have only ever wanted the best for her. I've just had so many things to worry about. No, Caleen snapped. Don't you dare start talking about yourself again. That's all you ever do. I can't believe you would do this. I never ask you for anything, and the one time I do, you can't follow through. Andraya stood now and stepped toward her. Caleen, please. No! Caleen shouted again. You broke your promise, just like all the promises you've ever made to me. You know another ship won't sail to Medine for another month, and now my mother will die. Caleen burst into a fit of sobs. She slapped a hand over her mouth and bolted for the door. Caleen, I truly am sorry, Andraya called after her. But before she finished, Caleen was gone. Andraya turned around and slammed a hard hand on the vanity, causing her brushes and hairpins to spring up and down. She leaned forward on her hands as she tried to focus her breath, but it still came out in great heaves. What have I done? How could I have forgotten something so important? Poor Caleen, and poor Mrs. Forthright. Andraya clenched her jaw to keep the tears from coming, but they stung her eyes anyway. Then a loud knock sounded at the door. Who is it? Andraya called through her teeth. She didn't hear the muffled reply. I do not wish to be disturbed, she said. Then she realized her reply was also too quiet for the visitor to hear as they knocked loudly again. Andraya growled under her breath and marched to her door and swung it open. There stood Besnik, beaming with a jovial grin. Your Majesty, good morning, he said with a bow. Andraya wanted to respond with an ill-mannered, What are you grinning about? At the same time, she wanted to greet him with cheer. Neither urge won over, so she just gave him a blank stare. Besnik cleared his throat. Is this a bad time, Your Majesty? Yes, Andraya said, her tone more curt than she intended. My apologies. The prince and I will share our good news with you later. Besnik bowed again, along with another figure in the shadows that Andraya just noticed. Your Highness, I did not see you. Prince Stefan bowed his head slightly. All is well, my lady? Andraya's eyes bulged. The prince's eyes bulged in response. If I may intervene, Besnik said. He turned to the prince and spoke slowly with his hands. Your Highness, my lady implies a more intimate relationship in Chaldrayan culture. Then he turned to Andraya. And in Deldrian culture, my lady simply means my queen. Andraya released the breath she was holding, and the prince flushed. I beg your pardon, he said quietly. Andraya lifted her posture. No matter. Since we are still standing here, you might as well tell me your good news. I could use some. Besnik and the prince both stared at her with concern. She hoped her eyes did not look red or wet. Well, Andraya pressed. It is no consequence, the prince said. Besnik frowned at him, and the prince spoke quickly to him in Deldrian. To that, Besnik nodded. We would like to know what we can do for you, Your Majesty, he said. Nothing at all. Not unless you want to hang my royal advisor. Both their necks jolted back. Andraya rolled her head. Not literally. I just need a new one. Then she bit her lip, internally cursing herself for speaking so candidly in front of the prince. Then her head snapped up. You, Besnik. Besnik placed a hand on his chest. Forgive me, what have I done? You misunderstand, sir. I want you to be my royal advisor. Besnik leaned forward a bit. But the council will not like you for picking someone outside the nobility. Andraya lifted one shoulder up and down. They dislike me already. I am capable of making good decisions. Of course you are, Besnik interjected in a booming voice. And you have many years of experience working with councilmen, and you believe in the very things I do. Besnik squared his shoulders. I would be honored, Your Majesty, if this would please you. It would very much. Besnik beamed, placing his thumbs behind his suspenders and bouncing on his heels. What can I do, my queen? Prince Stefan asked. Andraya glanced at the prince. Did he know his blue lapel brought out the color in his bright eyes and accentuated his broad shoulders? He must have done this on purpose. It bothered Andraya how much his appearance unnerved her. Then a smile split her face. You have just given me the most promising idea, Your Highness. Stefan's eyes widened. Which is? The queen's grin broadened. It is a secret. Splendid, Besnik said. Have we lightened your mood then, my queen? Before Andraya could respond, she heard the loud voice of Harriet, the head housekeeper, on the first floor, echo off the high ceilings. Oh, my dear, how awful. I am so sorry, honey. Then she heard the quiet sobs of Caleen echo as well. The two men pretended they did not hear. Andraya swallowed a new lump in her throat. Good day, she whispered, then shut the door before her tears could surface. The queen walked to her vanity once again and plopped in the chair. She stared at the masterpiece Caleen had created on her head, then started to weep. Poor Caleen, she cried aloud. She angrily wiped her tears as swiftly as they escaped, so as not to smudge her fresh makeup that Caleen had so meticulously painted. She forced herself to breathe deeply. Her meeting was in just a few minutes, and she still had to find a way to win the majority of the council over. If she did not show up with a viable plan, she would most certainly be voted out as head crown. Then she would be no good to anyone, not to mention the disgrace that would spread throughout all the island kingdoms when she came back to being a princess. And surely no prince would want her after that. Then she rolled her eyes. Not that she wanted a husband again. She would much rather have the chance to make a difference by ruling a kingdom on her own. But how could she focus on anything when Mrs. Forthright might die because she failed to do something as simple as write a letter? Andraya scampered to her writing desk and penned a letter to her father with all the professionalism and urgency she could muster. There. As soon as her council meeting was over, she would find a way to get this to Medine and bring Mrs. Forthright back by the end of the week. No matter what. She glanced at her reflection in the window, then remembered the idea Prince Stefan had sparked. Andraya would wear her most fitted red silk dress to the council meeting. Wearing her highest heels, she would undoubtedly look good when she walked. It would keep those hateful crusted men silent for at least a solid minute. Andraya couldn't help but grin wickedly at the thought. Then she frowned. This could result in finding out who all the slimy men were in the royal court. And she definitely did not want to know that. She shivered at the very thought. Also, as much as she would enjoy seeing all those men at a loss for words, she needed something more substantial to win them over as the royal leader. Dolian was right. She did not have experience or training. What could she bring to the political table that others could not? She paced in front of her desk for a long minute. Then her lips split into another, more genuine smile. She did have something, and with this, there was no way on earth anyone could take the head crown away from her. Benjamin! And that concludes Chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come back next week for Chapter 8, which you will see what Andraya brings to the political table. If you want to find out more about Brenda's books, you can visit brendasbooks.net. Until next time, take care.